Welcome to GROGTALK, episode 7. I'm James.
I'm Dan.
How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Well, I was better. What a difference 2 weeks, right? Top of the world. The ghouls save the party. The ghouls giveth. The ghouls taketh away. So.
Well, you know though, if you're playing a character called Autos the Third, because two before have died, you know it's just a matter of time before it's Autos the Fourth.
It is, yeah. Except I was a little. Usually I don't really care, but after because he was inflicted with kleptomania, he became a lot more of a personable character. He was a generic healing cleric that I didn't care much about, but once he was forcing various small trinkets down his pants to store them, he had something. So it was a little disappointing.
And I like the way that Edward basically indicated to you, not only you're a kleptomaniac, but like you have to like grab it now. You're like.
Right.
You're not just like furtively, secretively grabbing things.
So I did do and again, this is not the topic, but if you're listening to us, you realize we have these tangents. I did do something that Gary Gygax says I should not do, and you're supposed to strike us dead if a player touches the Dungeon Master's Guide. They're not supposed to look at it.
Those days are long. I mean, you play first edition now, and everyone at the table has a DMG. This is what makes it hard to be a dungeon master, I think, of one in this day and age. The entire table is sitting there with dungeon master guides, right?
Right.
And flipping through, And don't you love it when you announce a ruling and then immediately they're looking through them,
Well, that's why you should remind them. It's page 8. As this book is the exclusive precinct of the DM, you must view any non-DM player possessing as something less than worthy of honorable death.
Those were great days.
Those were good days.
I love those days.
I'm holding up the book for those who are listening to the podcast. I'm holding the Dungeon Master like a tablet, raising it up to say this is the word of Gary. So since I did violate one of the prime rules, only because I wanted to know, he mentioned kleptomaniac. There's rules about kleptomania in the
insanity.
In the insanity part of it, which was on page. It's like page 91, 92. And what was funny is you have a 90 period is. This is another mild form of insanity. Blah blah blah. There's a 90% probability of being seen stealing if the character is being observed. So you'll still steal even if you're observed. You don't care.
You're right.
So that's why I was rolling the die. That's why I asked if there was things for me to steal, and then I'd roll percentage and say, oh yeah, I walk over there and I try to look stealthy, because you basically have, and that would be a fun thing to add to thieves, because then they get a minus 10% in their stealing ability due to the overpowering urge to immediately steal the item.
So that's why you're disappointed your character died.
Right, yeah.
You could have played a kleptomaniac.
It was, and the fact that it was annoying, and I try not to be too annoying with them. I'm trying to be supportive, and now it became a hassle. So
yeah, but there's still that thing for the other party members who now are obsessed with whatever mission they're on, which is they've got other mental issues.
So that's permanent, huh? Apparently.
Apparently.
Okay, very good. I look forward for John to see that. So we're kind of switching this up a little bit. We're going to start with our word of recall segment, and then we'll do our suggestion, and then because we are too jibber-jabbery, I think having folks endure a 2.5 hour podcast is problematic. So we're going to break it up. We're actually going to create what's called Appendix A, and if you actually in the Dungeon Master's Guide, Appendix A is interesting because it is random dungeon generation and random dungeon generation for solo play. So this is very apropos for us. So Appendix A is when the party will gather and we will figure out what will happen to Pixie and Glade.
Oh, I see. So Pixie and Glade are sort of like that extra disc you get if you want to
That's right.
That's been cut out, the extended edition.
That's right. For the true hardcore folks, you listen to the podcast. You come for us talking about kleptomania. You stay for Pixie and Glade and what's going to happen with them.
Okay.
Right. So today in our word of recall segment. We're going to talk about post-adventure. So we talked about exploring, and we talked about encounters, and we talked about combat, and that's in the kind of the situation you're in the module or the adventure. And but in a campaign is a series of adventures. There's this idea of what happens between adventures, this post-adventure or pre-adventure. And there's a lot of things that can happen, and this is one depending on your play style, depending on how much time you have, how much time you invested in your world. This can be either a tremendous way for your group to fill out their characters and fill out the world, or it can be a math grinding, annoying, frustrating haggle between you and the players. Hopefully it's somewhere close to the former, but it's that. So Dan, what's your, again, taking from a perspective as being a longtime player and a DM who's run a game for 2 years plus now, what has been your experience with these kind of in-between adventure times?
Right. So other than, obviously the periodic administering of the estate of the character,
right,
which sometimes you have to do, my experience has been, this has been my answer to a lot of your questions, is it depends upon the party and the players, what they want. So I think one of the challenges with doing a lot of stuff in between adventures, other than just sort of the bookkeeping, which is, I know we're going to talk about experience points and calculating that to me is not the fun stuff. The fun stuff is, of course, is building up the characters, giving them a rich story, meeting people in town, who trains you, right? We just, do we have a name of the person who trains you? Is there a connection with that person?
Right.
My experience now has been that that's a little tougher to do when you're meeting just every couple weeks. You don't have a lot of time to do that. So I mentioned before, the days when, you're in junior high or high school and you can go home and you play every day.
Right.
I think you had a lot more time to do that. It was a lot more fun. I think it's a little bit, it's been harder for me to do that. I don't know, and I don't think the group that I've been running, I think some people want that, some people don't. We don't tend to do it. I don't know if your experience has been different.
I'm having the same challenge. I think when I was younger, the two things I see as a factor, depending on how much of this post-adventure work and time and effort you want to do, is one, the size of your party. So I don't know about your previous time when you were younger, but I assume you had less players than you do now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you have 2 or 3 players and they're running 2 characters and 1 DM, there's 4 of you, it's a lot quicker, you can spend a lot more time in town. We're having groups of between 7 and 10. Having 10 people try to tell what they're going to do and the DM interact, it's a lot of overhead. So I think that's one factor, and the other factor is, like Dan, I run every 2 weeks, and it's only for 3 or 4 hours, where we used to maybe play, if we get there whatever in the morning, you play till night, you have 8 hours of time you're filling, so you hate to waste time. So you got a bunch of people sitting around while one person's doing their fun thing, and the more people you have in the group, the harder it is for that to continue. So I agree with you, but rules as written, there's a lot of information in here, and it kind of says this is a major component of it. So I'm going to start with the most important thing you have to do and kind of work your way down. So the first thing that every player wants to know, besides getting magic items and money, as important as those are, experience points is important. So, it starts on page 84 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. So Dan, maybe you can explain what experience points are. Again, I don't know if it's an invention of Dungeons and Dragons, like armor class and hit points, but why is experience points important, and this idea of levels, how do they go hand in hand?
Sure. So experience points is points awarded to characters for finding treasure and for killing monsters. And the accumulation of experience points is the way to increase in levels for your characters. And everyone wants to go up in levels because it makes you more powerful, it gives you additional hit points, which makes it harder for you to kill, you become more accomplished. And I know it's interesting, I know that your idea, and I hadn't really thought about it, is that in the actual game, characters don't know levels. I assume they know titles. As you move up in level, you advance a title, but you don't like this idea of people walking around the game saying, hey, I'm level 4. Right. They don't know that. They may know the title.
Right.
And so, obviously, the idea for most people of Dungeons & Dragons is I take a low-level character, and this is very much the one experience. I take a low-level character who is a nobody, and he slowly is built into a hero. And how you become a hero is by advancing levels. So that's sort of the goal, is to get experience points. And if I just make a quick note about experience points, so we had a guest DM come run a game for us, and I was watching his group and the thread with his group. He writes up this big, wonderful recap of the game before, talking about the adventure and what happened, and the players they're in the middle of this dungeon. How are they going to get out? First response: hey, have you calculated experience points yet?
Exactly.
So that's what the characters care about. Yeah, so that's what experience points are.
And so unlike other games, there are almost quantum incremental, but there's still quantum changes that only occur once you go up a level. Other systems may say, well, you've used your sword a number of times, you get a percentage increase in your ability to fight with swords. You have a class, which is a series of skills and abilities that are tied to the character. Once they've gained enough experience points, which is, again, it's not arbitrary, but it is some way to measure. It's not completely arbitrary, but it's not exactly tied to reality. Again, Gary Gygax talks about, as a cleric, what is more experience? Beating up orcs or going to pray at his temple? But to kind of make this a game and not have to realism or at least pseudo-realism take over, every time you go up a level, you gain an increase in skill, as opposed to having these very slow incremental things that some skills increase and some skills don't. So experience points is obviously the currency besides gold pieces of the realm. And part of the reason treasure is so important in Dungeons and Dragons is because typically in the rule is, if a gold piece is earned fairly and commensurate to the level that the players are, it should earn 1 experience points per gold piece found.
Oh, you are going by the book.
Right.
Talking about, because I think most people play it, you get a gold piece, you get the 1 experience point, but you're absolutely right. There is that caveat that Gygax gives, which is, if you're the 10th level paladin and there's a goblin there and you push the goblin over and take his treasure, you shouldn't get 1 for 1.
Right.
That's unusual, though, right? I think it'd be unusual for a DM to ding you on that, don't you think?
Only if it's, I think the scenario is there because, again, most, unless you're running in the wilderness where you're going to get a disproportionate encounter, most encounters and dungeons are set up that's commensurate with the party's level. But the example would be, like, say you were in town and the 10th level paladin, why he would do this, walks into...
You're right, he would kill the goblin. Why is he just pushing him over?
Right.
He would skewer him.
Yeah, he would just look at him and the goblin would fall. But he was, if the 10th level thief went into the blacksmith's shop and stole the +1 sword that he had, gotten from his father's father, he's a 0 level fighter, is that really worth, and then sold it for 2,000 gold pieces, is that really worth 2,000 experience points? And the answer is, from Gary Gygax and Perry J4, no. It talks about the wizard who kills 20 orcs, that's not worth the same experience points as fighting a dragon. So, and that, of course, we were talking about this before we started, there's the rules, and then there's the variance to the rules, and sometimes that makes it a challenge. So I kind of just use the smell test. If it's within reason, I'm not going to start dinging them on that. So the way experience points are calculated, one of the first things you have to discuss, is it going to be group experience points or individual experience points? Calculating experience is the complete purview of the Dungeon Master. How treasure is divvied up is the purview of the players. Though there are suggestions in the player's handbook for how to divvy it up. And how the DM gives experience really will sometimes dictate how treasure is split up by the players. So how do you divvy up experience points?
So I like to keep it simple. So when I run a game, I say everyone gets an equal share of the experience. And now, so I don't say, oh, you're going to get this much experience, and if there's any treasure we calculate the treasure as part of the experience points and then divvy it up. So there's no sort of, there wouldn't be an issue of, hey, if I get this +1 sword, I get more experience. My view of it is that the experience comes from the party having found the treasure, including the magic sword. And so whether it's kept, sold, I do it all combined and divided equally. The only time I wouldn't do that is if there had been multiple sessions and some members hadn't been at certain sessions, then I would do it pro rata. But I do it that way to keep it simple. I know that there is a rule in there. And I think I get that. I think from somewhere, isn't there somewhere in the DMG where Gygax says that if a particular character kills a creature alone, single-handedly,
Right.
they can get it. I always read that to suggest then that it generally should be party-based.
Right. That's the exception. The division of experience points is slain monsters, all surviving characters who took part, and then the total is divided by the number of characters, each getting an equal share. And then NPCs, in this case, basically henchmen, those who are following with you, and we'll talk a little bit about that, they would get half of that share. Even though they take a full share, they only get half of it. So the party earned 10,000 experience points. There were 10 characters, let's say 9 player characters and 1 non-player character. Each would get 1,000 experience points, but the NPC would only get 500.
Oh, I didn't know. Okay, I see what you're saying. I hadn't thought about that. So what you're saying, so that is lost. So in other words, it's not that they get half and you divvy up the other half amongst the players. It's that half is lost.
Nope. It says. So example, a party of 12 characters encountered monsters. In the ensuing battle, all characters fight. 2 are slain. The XP for the monsters killed total is 4,300. So each survivor, by the way, you have to survive the adventure. You have to survive to get the experience points.
And we would give, if you don't survive, then it does go to the other people, doesn't it?
Right, that's right. You get nothing. So that's why dying like at the end, like my character did, kind of, if you were going to come back, kind of stinks because you get, not only you're dead, but you don't get any experience points for that either session or adventure, depending on how the DM does it.
It's great for the other players,
right?
Because you were helped them throughout the entire adventure, and then you die and they scoop up all your XP.
And it's right.
That's awesome. So they love it.
That's and in fact, as you're falling, they're already calculating how much more experience points they just got for that.
And then looting your body.
Right.
But I'm sorry, we digressed.
No, it's okay. So monsters totaled, let's say it was 4,300. So each surviving character gains 430. Adjusted for difficulty and for being actual player characters or halved for henchman characters.
So you had mentioned there adjusted for difficulty. So the DM can do an upward. Well, we talked about downward.
Yep.
We haven't talked about upward.
Yeah.
So you could do an upward if you wanted to.
Theory.
Like you said, the DM can do anything they want.
Right.
Because the DM can also. It's supposed to be unusual, but the DM has the authority to award experience points for other stuff.
That's
right. I think that you guys played a really good game, or you accomplished the mission. I'm gonna give you a multiplier, a 1.2, whatever. Right. Okay.
Absolutely. So monsters are the first thing you have to calculate. So the practicality of that is the dungeon master has to keep track of how many monsters were killed, how many hit points they had, because there's a table on page 85. Which I'm pulling up the Dungeon Master Guys, page 85, which shows the table of the monster level. They have a columns for each hit point, and if they have special abilities, and then the Dungeon Master has to figure out and calculate the experience points. Now, fortunately, for all the monsters in the monster manual, there is Appendix E, where they've calculated the experience points. The only thing you have to calculate as a Dungeon Master is how many hit points the actual monster that was defeated by them. So you're the dungeon master. They fight 5 orcs. You highlight on your module, or you keep track of 5 orcs were killed. You then have to figure out, okay, they're 1 hit dice. That's 10 base experience points plus 1 experience point per level. Let's say they had an average of 5, so a orc's about 15 experience points. And then you have to add all up, and that's part 1. And then part 2 is treasure. And again, if they've earned the treasure fairly, it's a 1-to-1. If not, then you can adjust it like that. So when in your campaign, you share experience. You just dump all the experience in and you divvy them. So where there really is a variable, and because you can give exceptions for monsters being slain single-handedly, and the example here on page 85 is, and a magic user protected by fighters keeping off the enemy as he or she casts spells which slay monsters, not fighting single-handedly. They accrue XP only to the slayer and not included in steps 1 through 3. So the example I would say is the thief is sneaking around and there's a guard and he or she kills him or trusses him up or whatever, defeats the monster by themselves. You could take that experience points and keep that separate. Unfortunately, the bookkeeping becomes so massive already. I would say it's one of you. Now that you're a dungeon master, you just love calculating experience points. You've told me a number of times it's probably your least favorite thing you do.
Can I give you my analogy?
Yes.
For this. So, if you're a DM, running a game is like inviting people over and cooking them a big dinner. They come over, right? You spent a lot of time preparing this dinner.
Right.
They come over, they enjoy the dinner, they leave. XP is then like they leave you with the dishes to do. So they're gone, and you got to do all the cleanup and figure that. That's how I view XP. So yeah, I hate calculating.
I thought you were, and that's a good analogy. I thought you were going to go that after the meal you have to figure out what they ate and figure out the calories.
Yeah, and
then send them to them. Thanks for coming. By the way, here's how much calories you had, just in case, to keep track of your weight.
And when you wake up at 7 in the morning, there's a text message for you saying, "Have you calculated the calories yet?"
Right.
Like, no.
Yeah. I need to decide how much I'm going to run tomorrow morning. Can you calculate that? Because I'd like to know if I level up. Yeah, it's unfortunate, and future games go to this idea of milestone, but experience points and calculating it fairly is very important, because one of the gripes of older editions of Dungeons and Dragons is this idea of balance with the player characters. And the way it's mitigated somewhat is the characters who have a lot more abilities to start off with, they need more experience points to go up in levels versus characters that are more simpler. Thieves, particularly, they need less experience points. So if you don't calculate experience points fairly, and if you don't do it right, and just say, you know what, every 2 times we play, everyone goes up a level, that skews, it levels the playing field at a disadvantage to the characters who are weaker. So it's certainly very plausible to calculate experience points and divvy it out by the number of players. But if you go to a system where it's just the amount of times played, then that hurts the thieves and the clerics and those characters who have a faster progression up.
And I like to mention the way we used to do it. I think this was your idea, and I thought it was the best way to do it, which is when the adventure's over, just sit there. I don't care if it's 11 o'clock at night. Sit there with the players and just crank it out.
Yeah.
And what's really nice is, and the group's been very nice about this that I have, is they've started keeping track of monsters killed. And well, I don't know if they've monsters. I think they have, and Bob was doing that, and treasure. And so the party is helping the DM out and has a list. And they need to sit down and say, okay,
right,
let's all get together. Let's just stay here and let's just crank it out. What was, you tell me the monster. So, I mean, the way it was working for us is someone would tell me the monster. I'd look up the XP and someone would have the calculator on their phone. And we would just crunch it all out. And it would take about an hour and it was done. And that was kind of nice. I think if you wait to the next day and you're the DM and it's just on you, it becomes quite a drag.
Oh, it's a hassle, and I think if you can do that, the problem tends to be, for me, I've tried to do that when I can. I do it. You're near at the end. It's already late in the session. You're just powering through the last part because you just want to end it, and now you're over the time. And then the last thing you want to do is spend another 40 minutes calculating. But if you can, I agree with Dan.
But what's nice is if you do it just on your own, you can just at some point, you just say, oh, it's 7,300.
Right.
And you've done nothing. You just made up a number.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay.
Well, I kind of scan, one of the things, newer modules in first edition.
I'm joking.
Well, I'm sure I've not calculated every experience point perfectly. But newer modules, so I'm running through some of the giants, and I'm using the compilation version of it. So they put the experience points for each monster right in the block, and nice. So the only thing you're having to look up then is the magic items. So again, one of the areas they talk about experience points for. So we talked about combat. We talked about treasure. It's 1 for 1. unless there's the idea that, so again, the example, if a 10th level magic user takes 1,000 gold pieces from 10 kobolds, the relative strengths are about 20 to 1 in favor of the magic user, so you should adjust the treasure by that factor. So the easy way to do that is don't have these disproportionate events. But you convert that into treasure. Treasure equals experience points. You add it to the thing. So magic items. So magic items in the Dungeon Master's Guide, they have two values. They have experience points value and they have sale price value. And this is the chart that everyone loves because the magic item chart is the again, magic items is what makes Dungeons and Dragons fun. You want to give out magic items. You want the unique ones, but because there's a numerical value, two things happen. One, the players obviously will if you split experience points individually. So let's say Dan's character, if Glade's got a +1 sword, and Glade would be the only one who would get the experience points. Well, then they all jump for the most. The magic items have the most experience points because they want to go up levels. The second thing is they look at the sales price and they go, "Hey, I want to go to town. Where's Dan's magic shop where I want to buy a potion of climbing for 500 gold pieces?" And you go, "No, you can't do that." And we'll talk about that more. So, but magic items are one of the areas that I've decided, you know what, I'm not giving out individual experience points because it causes behavior from the players to collect magic items they don't need. Mm-hmm. And then two, it's another thing I have to calculate separate from that as opposed to dumping that. What's your thoughts on that?
No, I agree completely. I think you divvy up all the experience points and divide it. Now, of course, what makes it complicated is, and if I recall correctly, so if you, with respect to a magic item, if you sell it, you get the 1-to-1 gold piece equivalent. If you keep it, is it 10%? You get 10% of the...
Well, yeah, it depends. It depends on some of them. It's about 10% plus or minus. Some give more experience than others.
Oh.
So the experience points value. So for instance, if we had found a necklace of adaption, the experience points value is 1,000 experience points. If we sold it, it's 10,000 gold pieces. Right. So that's a 10%. But others are... Phylactery of Faithfulness is 1,000 experience points, but it only gets sold for 7,500.
So, and I always thought it was all basically 10%. It sounds like a lot of them are 10%, but not all of them, obviously.
It would make it so much easier, but yes, they're varied.
So one of the things that you have to do then is, before you can tally experience points, the players have to tell you. Especially if you're doing it as a whole group and divvying it up equally, you have to know what's the party. The party has to decide which magic items are keeping, which items are selling, because you don't know the experience points at that point.
Exactly.
And I assume, and most DMs, I think, say you've got to decide now. So in other words, you can't keep it and use it. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know how long it is.
Right.
But I basically do it at the end of the adventure. If you announce you're keeping it, you've kept it. And so if we come back and you decide, oh, I want to sell it, typically I'd be like, well, no. We've done experience points. You decide to keep it. You've got the fewer experience points.
Right. Yeah. Because if you keep it, you get the experience, and then you sell it, you just get the gold value at that point. That's right.
Right.
Yeah, you still can sell it. Now, how do you deal with selling magic items? We'll kind of talk just briefly when it comes to, do you allow for them to sell it right away, or do you make it a little bit of a challenge? I know we talk a little bit about, because that's later in buying things, but what's your thoughts on that?
So for me, I've decided that I find nothing is less interesting than haggling over gold pieces in D&D. So
wait a minute, I just heard the last person unsubscribe. The person that's why they play the game.
That was it. I was here. They were waiting for that podcast.
That's right.
Haggling
magic item experience.
Haggling without merchant.
They're like, yeah, with that merchant. How do you do a 3-hour podcast?
It's their favorite part of the game. I mean, seriously, you devote half an hour to a discussion of doors, and we get nothing on haggling with merchants.
You're passionate about doors, but yet the art and science of haggling.
I'm a complicated man.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think I enjoy running an adventure. I do not enjoy playing the skillful merchant who is trying to get you to pay 12 gold pieces for the rope instead of 10 or whatever.
That's right, the angry omniscient, like we said.
Right.
NPC.
They're right. So, I charge... and I know, so for example, I think Keep on the Borderlands, Gary Gygax had the 10% church. Makes sense because they're out in the Borderlands, prices are high. But look, to me, it gets a little bit boring. This law, supply and demand. Are they haggling? And
hey, you're getting to the economy, but you're right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a seamless web.
That's right.
The game is a seamless web.
That's right.
So I just charge them what's the player's handbook. So to answer your question is, I don't find it a lot of fun to sit there at the end of the game and say, okay, well, you try to sell that potion of heroism. Well, go into the first store and he's not taking it. So maybe I could, it's like a used car salesman. And that just, to me, it drags the game on, and so I don't like it.
Okay. And I think that's fair. I think for me,
I just insulted your entire approach to your game. I'm sorry if I have.
No. I think for me the problem with because what the players will say is, if someone's willing to buy them, why can't I buy from them? Why is there
not a magic shop?
Right. And if you want to have a magic shop, that's fine. I'm just not a big fan of it. Magic should be rare. It should be hard to come by. And just because the players have a lot of it doesn't mean society in large has a lot of it. So that's the game I play. I think both of them are. But because I've made that statement, then I do have to spend a little time on saying, no, we're not going to. You can't just sell this for 3,000 gold pieces. The version I run is, there's a high-level magic user. He's basically a shyster, and he collects all these magic items. Says, well, I'm going to go talk to my friends, and I'll tell you what you can get. I'll trade you for them. And basically the trade is, I'll give you what I'm going to give you for them. There is no haggling. There's no nothing. You can either keep them, or you can give them to me, and I will trade them for other magic items of more usefulness. And you can give me some suggestions of what you want, but it's never a good sale for them for the most part. It's more of, you're not going to be able to take 20 potions of healing and get a +3 sword. It's not going to be a game breaker kind of thing. You may be able to get 20 and get a scroll with fireball. That seems to be reasonable. So I don't want to haggle, so that's why I basically take it all. I figure out all the experience points or the cash for them. I take some percentage off, and then I find something that will be helpful for the characters, that's maybe in line with what they're, but not exactly what they want, because then it goes back to the adventures is where they should be finding the treasure, not from hoarding up a bunch of stuff and then giving it to the magic shop and upgrading in town, which is more of a video game kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm sure you can come up with justifications, and you've provided one there about why it doesn't work both ways. And I think the reason you're able to sell them is because there really isn't a market. They're very hard to find, right. So they're scarce, and so it's very easy for you to unload them. So if I have a rare item, it's easy for me to sell that. It's not easy for me to find it necessarily, and it might be charged much more. I think at a certain point, isn't it okay, don't you think, as a DM, to say, look, it's because of game balance, right? So why can't I'm trying to remember where Gygax has admitted, I think, in some places that it was because of game balance that you do certain things. I think at a certain point, can't you just say, look, because it would not make the game as much fun. Right. That's why. Okay. I don't need
I agree. I think it's either way is fine, but that's been my rationale for that. And for this campaign and another campaign, if I had a big city that with 100,000 people in it, and it was kind of a Lankmar or Greyhawk, yes, there would be magic shops and there would be all these kind of things. But in a town of 300 people, a hamlet, there's not going to be Bob's Magic Shop where they've got, Vorpal weapons and this type of thing, because every bandit would come in there and attack the town and seize it. And then you have the thing of, well, how would it be, if they're selling in tens of thousands of gold pieces of material, there would have to be, just like a bank vault, it would be pretty significant. So it can be done, you just have to scale it with that. And that's, I think, the tension in my group right now, is because they want to do all these things, and they're in it's a town. For a medieval town, 300 is pretty good, but it's not a city that has the merchant class that they're used to. So, okay. So one of the things is, what does it mean to return with treasure? When does that treasure count? Is there a circumstance, or how do you rule that in your game? I don't think we have a place to stay per se. We get back to the town. Is that when it's counted? When we put in the bank? What's your take on that?
Well, my recollection is, doesn't the DMG say something about what successfully remove it from the dungeon?
Like
something to that extent. So, I'm not a big fan of, the bandits waylay you on the way back to town. So again, a lot of it is just because I don't think the players. I don't know. Maybe they would find it fun. I don't have a lot of time,
Right.
and so the game session is ended, and so we basically just assume you're back in town, and so I haven't had a lot of those questions arise. So the reality is, once the adventure is done, I say, okay, we start giving it up. I mean, I have had some situations where you've got to get back out of there, but no, I'm not a big stickler for that. How do you handle that?
Well, the reason I bring it up is because, and I've read it, it's on page 85. Treasure must be physically taken out of the dungeon or lair and turned into a transportable medium or stored in the player's stronghold to be counted for experience points.
And I was going to mention that, which is that another thing is how do you get the stuff out of there? And I know no one likes dealing with encumbrance rules and all that stuff, and that's somewhat related to this issue. But yeah, how do you get the stuff out of there? So you found all this gold, and I don't know. I'd like to get your take on this, and I guess it depends on the players. Does it make for a richer game, or does it make it for a worse game? To then say, okay, tell me how you get it out of there. Do you have the transportation? I mean, I can see some players may enjoy that with the realism. You got to think ahead, and others may just be terribly bored.
I would say 80% of them are terribly bored and
Yeah.
they want you to hand wave it. The other 20%, and the larger the group, the more likely you're going to disappoint someone with that. So I think you have to strike the middle ground of, or you have to do like my predecessor did, which is you and Ed, who gave out a portable hole to Gimbal, the new illusionist, and now it's all hand waved. He's like, everything's, they throw it in the portable hole.
Yeah.
I've told them last time, they will, the next adventures, they're going to tell me what's in the portable hole, because I have no idea what's in there. Every time they've thrown dead bodies in there, they've thrown armor in there, they have books they've thrown in there, they have money.
Oh, so you would need to do a spring cleaning of your portable hole,
Right.
Perhaps once a year?
Right.
Maybe you should explain what a portable hole is.
I'm sorry. So portable, that's very good. So a portable hole is you want to talk about a magic item that is, if you go to Dragon's Foot and describe how the portable hole works, it's described in that you unfurl this cloth onto a surface, and it makes a hole 6 foot wide and 10 feet deep. It's basically a 6 foot wide circular hole that goes down.
And that's to be different from because that's to be differentiated from a bag of holding.
Right. A bag of holding has I think it's pretty much a fixed dimensions based on the type of it is, and it has a fixed volume or weight of that it can hold. And if you exceed it, the bag rips open and all the contents are lost in this multi-dimensional space. Basically, it's a magical container that uses an extra dimensional space to hold more stuff than it should.
So the bag of holding is much more useful than the portable. So the portable hole is going to fill up quicker.
No, the portable hole will hold. In fact, go out to Dragon's Foot. How much coins is it a portable hole? It depends how big the coin is. It could go anywhere from 100,000 to 3 million gold pieces it could hold in a hole. Yeah, portable hole is way bigger.
So you're unhappy with your party because they've got this. They've just been throwing a bunch of stuff in.
Right, so it's basically the size of the room we're in, or at least half the size of the room versus a bag of holding, which can only hold 3,000 or 4,000 gold pieces. So that's how we
bag of hold. Okay, so I thought it was the opposite. So it's bag of holding.
Yeah. So the volume limit of the largest bag of holding that you can find is 250 cubic feet. So that's 10 by 10 by 2.5 feet. So it's large, but not the weight limit is only 1,500 pounds. Whereas the portable hole talks nothing about weight limit. You could put bars of iron in there and it wouldn't make a difference. So that's how we've solved it. Everything's like, they found 10,000. The hard part is if they're trying to scoop up the money, how quickly they can scoop up the money while they're fighting or whatever it is. That's one of the thing about it.
Right. So yeah, but the DM should ask, how do you get it out of there? Even if you don't I don't demand much. Right, you generally want to, well, how do you get it out of there?
Yeah, and I think that you can't just completely hand wave it. You just have to say, if you found 10,000 gold pieces, how are you getting it out of there?
Right.
Well, and most likely the player hasn't wrote it down. Okay, so leveling up character. So the joyous moment comes. You, as a dungeon master, state the amount of experience points, and one of the group, hopefully one of the lower level, the more rapid ones, hey, I've gained a level. So what happens then when someone gains a level? What has to happen?
So it's very exciting. So for me, the biggest thing when you gain a level is in first edition AD&D, you get an additional hit die. You get to roll for additional hit points. And that to me, of course, there's going to be other benefits. It's possible that you may move up on your ability to hit, the hit table, right? It has different ranges. You may go to a higher one on that. But, and certain classes, you get certain, like fighters, well, every character class at some point you're going to have more proficiencies on weapons, things like that. I know that, with like druids and some of these other subclasses, you go up levels, you get certain benefits. And we know thieves, their thieving skills
incrementally improve,
which is a big deal because the thieving skills are very weak for a low-level thief in first edition. I'm still stunned that we got like second, third level characters or whatever. I'm like, well, what's your whatever percentage, like 20?
Yeah,
really?
Silent 20%.
20%. It's like you have no training at all. And but so I think the biggest one I think of is the additional hit points, because of course hit points, that's life.
Right. It gives you a cushion. Just like in yesterday's game, my character had 8 hit points. I was down 6. I got hit for 6, whereas other characters had taken a number of blows because they had 20 hit points.
Right.
So that's a big deal.
And you gotta roll for that, right? So you could get a 1, and that's very. So everyone, it's fun, right? Everyone sort of often you get around and say, okay, who's leveling up, and they roll for your hit points. And everyone watches and they're rooting.
Everyone. That's part of the tradition that you should do that in front of people.
Part of the tradition, yeah. Part of the first edition tradition. We don't trust you.
That's right. I'm sure you in your job you're trusted with tens of thousands of dollars, a heavy piece of equipment. You've been in the military, but we don't trust that you're going to be honorable with your 6-sided roll. So.
Yeah, because if you commit a crime out there, you go to prison. But what's the penalty for cheating at D&D? Right. That's it's all about
cheating in
potential
D&D.
penalty.
Another great podcast we need to. So, the cleric, let's say, who's one of the character classes that need the least experience points to progress, they announced that they are now second level. They've moved from being an acolyte to an adept, I think, is the next level.
Wow, that'd be good. If you got that right, very impressive. You're right.
If it's acolyte and adept,
you didn't get it right. It's not impressive.
Acolyte to adept.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll be here all week. That's. Thank you for the coffee. I appreciate that. So.
And 5th level, famously blank.
You're right. I am Bob,
We know
you're very powerful.
We know the answer to this, though. I can't remember. It's somewhere. There's a reason.
Is it perfect?
Yes, I think it is. Or prefect. Was it? Isn't there a typo somewhere where it said perfect?
Yeah,
it's supposed to be prefect.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm perfect.
That's right.
So what are you?
I'm
the perfect cleric.
That's right. What else did you want to know? So now you've got these experience points, and the first thing on page 86 it says is experience points are merely an indicator of the character's progress towards greater proficiency in his or her profession. Upward progress is never automatic, and that's in full capitals.
Oh.
He's screaming at us. So explain the process of how this poor excited player started to play the game. They have enough experience points, and now the DM explains the reality that is in first edition, how this is done. So rules is written as you understand. What's the process that has to happen?
Well, I assume you're alluding to training.
That's right.
Okay. No, but you mentioned something, and I think I remember reading that, is that even if you've got the XP, the experience points, XP, and you got the money to train, it sounds like the DM can say, I'm sorry, you're not ready.
Right.
Is that right? So in other words,
it's not ready. It's going to take a long time, and you may not have enough money because there's a calculation. So I'll let Dan read this. So what's supposed to happen is that every session, the dungeon master is supposed to basically give if you're at work and one of the most unpleasant things you have to experience at work is your performance review, right? Your supervisor sits down with you and evaluates how you've done. Well, congratulations. If you play first edition Dungeons and Dragons, you as the dungeon master are the supervisor, and you're supposed to rank each player's ability to play their character's class as you think it should be played, and score them. E for excellent, S for superior, F for fair performance, or P for poor performance. Basically 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so each session, let's say you have 3 sessions, and Dan's character plays Superior 1 and Excellent, Superior, and Fair, and he is able to go up a level. His ranking would be a 2, which is Superior play. So he would get a score of 2, and then he would calculate the level of character multiplied by 1,500 gold pieces times the week of study during training. So in this case, I'd say, congratulations, Dan, your character's level 2. Now you need to spend 2 weeks training at 1,500 gold pieces. And he would look down and he thought, oh, I have 1,500 gold pieces, I'm good. No, you need 3,000 gold pieces because you were not superior play. And that's the challenge.
I hate this rule. Okay.
Yes.
So, and I want to ask you about that first paragraph there on 86, right, which says that it's never automatic, in caps. The actual, in the last line, is the actual words that matter for you, the DM, to decide. I'd like to get your interpretation on that. Do you think that means, I don't think anyone would do this, but do you believe that means that I, just as the DM, can say, I don't think you're not ready? So it has nothing to do with the 1, 2, 3, 4. It's, I'm sorry, you're not going. I don't know why I would say this. What, you're a 5? I don't know. You're a 10. You're that bad? But do you read that to suggest that I, as the DM, before we get to the next paragraph, I can just say, look, it's not happening? I
guess you could. It would be, I can't think of a situation where you would do that to a character and expect them to come back.
I agree.
To a player and expect them to return.
I agree.
Unless you've, same thing like the performance review, right? Now we're getting into management. If you hey, I'm saying you every day, Dan, and then we sit down for a performance review, and the first time you hear that you've actually done nothing this whole performance period.
Right.
We're not giving you any more money.
Right.
And you need to keep working on it. That would be a problem.
I'm only paying you what I am paying you because federal law requires me to pay you minimum wage.
This is the minimum I can pay you without going to jail.
Right.
Or getting a fine.
I think this rule makes me very uncomfortable as a DM, and I'm going to ask you in a second if you've ever used it because I'd like to hear it. And I knew when I decided to try to play by the book, this one I knew about, and it weighed on me because I figured if there's going to be a rule I'm probably going to violate, it's going to be this one. How uncomfortable must it be? Who wants to give a performance review? How uncomfortable must it be to sit down? I mean, is it like a performance review? Do I take them separately? Like, okay, we've divvied up the experience points. James, please come with me.
Right.
And we go into a little room, and I'm like, James, yes, I'd like to talk to you about what you do. So, you're the cleric. Remember that time with the skeleton and you didn't turn? Why didn't you try to turn?
I'm folding my hands and getting.
You're very upset because you're perfect. So you don't understand what's going on here because you thought you're perfect. Why didn't you try to turn that skeleton? Because you fought it and you didn't even try to turn.
And I don't remember getting an operations manual to say when I needed to turn it. But was there a standard operating procedure for this?
Well, presumably you were trained as a cleric. Did you not have training to get first? It's like you have no cleric training at all.
Well. Whose fault is that? I work for this party. It's not what I have to do everything here. This is very frustrating.
You're being very aggressive, and you shouldn't blame other party members. It's your scores. It's you. I was going to give you a 2, but because of your attitude, you need a 3. So I'm giving you a 3.
That sounds retribution.
Well,
it's a retribution practices.
I don't think that's unlawful.
I'm going to need to go to the equal opportunity DMs.
You're about to get fired. Okay.
Fired?
You're going to be on a performance improvement plan.
This is not active
very
listening.
soon.
You're not being a good supervisor. I see you're upset about getting this thing.
Do you see how much fun this is?
Yes.
This is fun.
Why are we not doing this? This could be the whole game. After every session. I don't, because we get done, 10:30, 11 o'clock. What would be wonderful is from 11 to 12 when everyone's really tired, reviewing their performance.
Well, you know what? So we do our games on the meetup site.
Right.
So I'm sure you've noticed. We get rated.
Yeah.
We have stars.
That's right.
And so it is interesting, right? So maybe maybe we should rate players. But I think.
Go ahead.
I'm just gonna say I think this is very uncomfortable. I've always given 1s. I think that players 1,500 gold. A lot of groups don't even use the training rule, right? So the training rule was designed, as I understand it, to make sure that the characters didn't accumulate exorbitant sums of money. It was to siphon it off, and there's also, we can talk about, 100 gold pieces a month you're supposed to spend on food and whatever. and and a lot of groups don't even use the training rules. And so then to come in and say, the minute you say we're using training rules, there's going to be a from your players. Then if you come in and say, no, by the way, you're a 2,
right?
Which, it's kind of like as a professor giving out a B.
Right.
The student should be happy, but they're not.
No.
Right? You're like, why are you unhappy with the 2, James?
That's
Your
right.
cleric was superior.
That's right.
And that guy wasn't excellent.
Right.
You should be happy with the 2.
I've already gone to the dean.
Right. You've already complained.
In fact, it's when I saw the B on my thing, I've gone to the dean.
Right. Exactly. The test wasn't fair.
Right.
It's subjective.
Right.
And so
maybe we could do 360 reviews where actually we don't rate them, but the rest of the players rate them.
People do that. Somebody suggested
Really?
that. Yes, I've heard that, and I guess it wasn't you who said yes.
No, it wasn't me.
It may have been online.
That sounds horrible.
Where it is what you do is that the players rate everybody.
I know in tournaments they do that to help with scoring, and if it's an individual scoring, but I've not heard in normal gameplay.
Well, but as a
That's
DM,
amazing.
this is perfect because what it does is it ensures that the player, rather than being upset with you, is upset with the other players.
But you'd have to put some kind of thing in because you want to. The whole point of this is to make this as painful as possible, but not for you as the dungeon master. So there have to be something like they do. There's a pot. There can only be one, like the bell curve. So you can't have everyone can't be a 1 because everyone would just get
the
a 1
distribution. Yeah.
Right. So then there'd have to be this kind of Machiavellian thing where they'd all have to figure out there'd be so if there's 10 of you, there have to be 1 1, 1 4, and 3 2s and 3 3s, or something to that effect, or 4 and 4. So basically, only one person could be a 1, one person could be a 4, and they would have to and then you would grade it on a curve based on that. I think it would be amazing. That could be the game in and of itself.
I really wonder if Gygax used this.
I don't know.
Did he? I mean,
but it's a whole page. It's not just a part of it.
Well, Gygax can get away with it because he was Gygax, but me. You're a 3. Like, I've been playing 30 years longer than you, kid. I'm not really a kid anymore.
Right.
I'm pretty old. But whatever. I took 29 years off, so it's a little weird for me to judge people. So after you see my play with Pixie and Galette, who am I to say, no, but I can say, look, I know poor play.
Right.
I know it very well.
Right. You've done way better than that. You deserve superior play.
Yes. So, all right. So, but you're supposed to do that. If you're playing by the book, give them, and so... Yeah, so that's per week, which means it's every point is an extra 1,500. And if I understand it, is if you're level 1 and you want to go to level 2, it's 1,500 times. So let's say it's 1 week. It's per your current level,
That's right.
not the level you're going
level
up to.
of the trainee character.
So if you got a 2 and you're level 1, it would be 3,000 gold pieces to train, and you need that money to advance level.
So the problem is, and this is where it again hurts the balance. If you have characters who are to make sure other classes don't overpower them, the idea is you should have a party that has like a 7th level thief and a 5th level magic user, because of all things being equal, the experience points, they would be slightly higher. They'd be higher level. Well, if you're a thief, to get 1st level, you need 1,251 experience points. So assuming some of those experience points came from fighting monsters, let's say you got 1,000 gold pieces and you got 250 experience points from defeating monsters. You're level 2 now. You need 1,500 gold pieces to train. You don't have 1,500 gold pieces to train. That's assuming you do excellent play. So it's always this, you're not even trying to siphon the money. You never have enough money to deal with that. And so this is the frustrating thing for, so then the players either have to give other people money so that they can go up in level, and they're constantly broke. So
you can take out a loan.
You can take out a loan, or you have to take a quest, and that part is beneficial. If you don't have a linear campaign, you can force the players or give players some options to play another adventure. I think the goal is, right, you said, to siphon off money, but also to have them continue to adventure. What's the motivation for adventuring? Because they need more money because they're constantly being broke. But is it a fun mechanic? No, it's not a fun mechanic. I don't think anyone is thrilled with that. And so I've done a house rule to make, while it still costs money, it's more of a percentage of their the amount of experience points they needed versus a flat fee, so that while it can get prohibitive at higher levels, at least the initial level, they only need a few hundred gold pieces.
And that would make sense. And
thank you.
We should talk, I like that. And we should talk about maybe a little bit about what happens when you can't go up level, but you keep getting experience points, right? You max at the next, right, if I recall correctly, the number, 1 away from the next level. So let's say that I have enough to go to a second level, but I don't have enough money. And so I go on another adventure because I'm trying to get that money. I'm, of course, accumulating experience. My understanding is, though, I can only accumulate experience up to right before level 3, right? So the max of level 2?
Yes, and the way I read it, and this is a scenario that happens if, let's say, you have a first level character adventuring with third level characters. And so he or she survives, they get a lot more experience points than the first level would normally get, and they go from 0, let's say the cleric who needs 1,500, they get 2,000 experience points. So they've gone up, that they would just go up a level if they had the money. But let's say they got 4,000 experience points. That would they have enough experience to go to third level, but one way to rule it is, and the way it sounds to me is, you would just get up to 1 experience points less than third level.
That's the way I read it.
Right. So it says, once a character, in bold print on page 86, once a character has points which are equal to or greater than the minimum number necessary to move upwards in experience level, no further experience points can be gained until the level actually gains the new level. So, but before that, it reads something similar to what it is. So, the challenge is, some could argue, so what happens, the big problem with the money rule and this, so you say you have a thief who has 1,500 experience points. They go back to town. He wants to train. They don't have enough money as a group to train. That thief can't earn any more experience points at that point. They're at 1,500. They can't earn any more until they gain that level.
Oh, you don't let them go up to...
No, because that's what the big bold thing says.
Yeah, I know, and it's confusing. I want to say that there may have been, I know Sage Advice is not binding, which talked about this. I could be wrong, and I thought indicated that you could actually go up to 1 before, but yeah, that's because there was always some confusion on that, right? And so you've got it as they're frozen. They can't keep...
Well, so before that says, thus a character successfully adventures and gains experience points which is not equal to a new level, but almost gained for yet a second such level, cannot apt to forego the period of training and studying to go up a level to gain a few more points in training. So in other words, the way I read it as, once they go over a level, they have to train, but you don't penalize them. You don't go, you have to train after that amount. If they get the scenario of they're at 0, they can go up to 1 experience points less, but they must train at that point, or else they won't get any more experience points. Now, if they get 10,000 experience points, they have 0, then they would only go up to 2,999 if it was a cleric going to third level. So they lose those.
Right.
I would not let them have 10,000 experience points and then after 4 adventures.
Oh, great.
Right. So it basically comes down to, that's why the economy rule of being so expensive is problematic, because then they may not have enough money to train. Then you have the cleric and the thief who can't train because they don't have enough money as a group, and then they go out adventuring and they have no reason to adventure because they don't have enough money. And then they all come back to town, everyone levels up, and they've lost that thing. So it's really important. You're going to have to figure out a way to, well, at least I think so, if you're going to keep party balance, first air quote, to allow those higher, faster skilled party members to go up. Because there's already a disincentive for the party. If the party's made up of magic users and rangers and paladins, things that need higher levels, they want to keep adventuring. They don't want to go back to town and figure things because they can't go up in levels. Whereas the clerics and thieves constantly want to go back to town because they want to level up because they have higher progressions of levels. So that's always a tension when it comes to this. The party's like, well, let's forget about going back to town. We only got one guy who can go up. From a strength perspective, you should always be going back to town.
I got a real quick question,
Sure.
just to make sure I understand this, because I know you've made this argument before. And so, say you got a thief, you need 1251.
Mm-hmm.
If you get 1251, you're not going to be able to advance in level because you don't have. You need. Let's say you were excellent. You need 1,500 to train.
Right.
But if you're only 1251, this necessarily indicates you don't have 1,500 in gold pieces.
That's right.
Unless you saved a lot of money, but for your initial roll, you're not going to get that much money. I mean,
right.
So you're simply not, a low-level thief is not going to have...
It's impossible.
Unless they get a loan,
right.
Or they really didn't spend much. I can't remember how much gold they get initially. I mean,
right.
Well, that'd be interesting. So the thief rolls initially, and they want to buy a bunch of stuff. Whoa.
Yeah.
You want to hold on to that money.
You want to put it in a high
Yes.
risk savings account. And
Absolutely.
roll for it
You're right. You need to invest it.
That's right.
You need to go, and get it invested. Because you're going to need. You want to come back. Hope the economy has done well.
Exactly.
Right. The Greyhawk Exchange or something. Right.
Some kind of Bitcoin or whatever that version is.
Right. Something.
Greycoin.
The new thing. Right. Or you invested in some like new magic, potion or something. That's going to be all the rage. And that's right. Okay, got it.
So they could not go over. So they went adventuring. A thief needs 1251 to be second level, 2500. They get 2,000 experience points. I would let them go to 2,000 experience points, but if they did not go up in level, they would be stuck at. They would still be first level with 2,500 experience points until they had enough money to train.
Yeah, and their starting goal isn't going to do this. It's 20 to 120 gold pieces.
Well, they would have to basically gamble it, which is another option. So that's the problem with the costs. And so you, as a dungeon master, have to decide, or we all have to. If your rules is written, here's the consequences that I've seen in the game. What happens is you get, if you want to support to minimize the party imbalance. Again, paladins have 20 abilities. Magic users can sleep 10 people. They take a long time to go up, but if you blunt that by preventing the lower level players or faster progressing characters from going up, you have that problem. Okay. So other in-town activities, let's kind of go through them quickly. We talked a little about the economy, and you've kind of, and I won't say this in a negative way, this is not a big thrill for you, but apparently for when Gary Gygax wrote this book, there's 2 pages on the economy of and how you deal with fees and how you deal with things. Again, this idea of, and I understand why, because one of the challenges of all these games is the game makes a lot of sense at low level. It's easy for the dungeon master to play it. There's a lot of fun, a lot of easy ways to challenge them. Mid level is also pretty good, but as you get to higher and higher levels, it becomes more of a gonzo factor, superhero kind of thing, and the money that they need to collect. A 20th level wizard needs to get 400,000 experience points every level. So that means they're collecting hundreds of thousands of gold pieces. What do you do with this? So I think he's trying in the Dungeon Master's Guide to kind of figure out ways to use that money. And so on page 90 and 91, it talks about the economics and monster placement and how you place treasure. So from a Dungeon Master, it's great to kind of flavor that out, but we don't do a whole lot of that. Is that a fair statement?
I certainly don't. I think that it gets a little tiring to say, okay, take off a silver piece because you've entered the town.
Right.
There's the duty.
Or the 10 minutes haggling with the guard to get into the town.
Right. And that's invariably what's going to happen then, is if you say, well, there's a silver piece tax or duty as you enter the town, someone's going to want to sneak in, they want to haggle, and it becomes half an hour later over the silver piece. So no, I don't do a lot of that. I do like where Gygax says what I think he says. What on average 100 gold pieces a month, because characters they're kind of
it's like Conan when they get the gems. They're just drinking and carousing. They're just spending their money because they're living today because death could come at any moment.
Right. So that's kind of nice that you can just do I don't think players are excited. You got to keep track of time. And I don't think they're excited when you tell them, okay, it's 100 gold pieces for that month, deduct it. I'm sure they're unhappy.
I think it's per level, isn't it?
Oh, it may be.
I think so.
I've never had a campaign where the party's made it past first level, so I wouldn't know.
You have second or third levels at this point. Well, the ones who have continued to figure out ways not to die because they get lucky or whatever, then yeah, that's because they run, which is smart. But yes, the idea of upkeep and taxes and fees. One I will use again. I kind of gauge where the game is. If they're flush, if I want to give players experience points, so they can go up in levels, and I give them a lot of treasure, well then they want to start doing crazy things with it. They're not just happy to hoard the money and they either want to buy. Yes, I want to go look for a Vorpal weapon. No, you're not going to go find a Vorpal weapon. Or I want to build a tower, which we'll talk about later. But your second level, you can't build a tower. Mm-hmm. Or I want to buy the whole town because I have 20,000 gold pieces. No, you're not going to buy the whole town. The king will just arrest you and take your money. So one of the things I will use is if when they take the money out of the orc tomb, or excuse me, the old king's tomb, the coin may be from an old realm or from another realm. Oh, you can't use that money here. You have to do a money changer, and there's, take 10% off of that. And that, you want to talk about a good time, having all the players have to figure out and calculate the 10% off of that.
Right.
That makes it, and of course it's the same magic user who they try to trade magic items with. He's the one who runs the treasury too. So they have a hatred for the magic user who runs that.
And that's another reason why I don't like adding the percentage, like upping 10% on the equipment list, because then they're like, oh, that's 10%. And what? How many? So many gold and so many silver. Right. How many silver are in a gold? And you're it's awful.
Well, yeah, this thing is 2 copper pieces.
Right. Okay.
What does that equal to? There's nothing lower than copper pieces. So.
Yeah. No. Because you know what you do? That's where 2 bits, 4 bits, 6 bits, $1. Because it was 8 bits. What you would do is because I think the Spanish, they would cut the coins into 8. That's what you do. So you could have 8 bits of copper.
So we learned something new. So
2 bits, 4 bits, 6 bits of copper.
So now I'm going to tell them that if they want to buy that for 10%, they need to provide two copper pieces and 2 bits of a copper, basically.
Yeah. Well, I guess it would be would you have to?
Well, we're not going to do that
into 10. So you're already confused.
Info@GROGCon. If someone out there could figure that out, or tweet us at GROGTALK, you could let us know what that would be.
Yeah. The original Bitcoin.
Someone could write that for us. That would be great.
Yes.
So that's an opportunity, and price isn't available. One thing I will try to remember is price and availability for items. And what do you we talked about the 10% increase of that, but do you allow all items to be available? What happens if they want, I want a caltrop or something that's not on the list there? How do you handle that?
So it depends. Just because it's on the list doesn't mean they're going to get it. It depends. Depends where they're at. So if they're on the borderlands, somewhere far away, it may not be available. If they're going to probably have a home base. They have a home base and it's a decent sized town, which I think is nice to do. Then for me, it's anything that's on. It's like Manhattan. Anything on the equipment list is available at that price. If they do bring up something like caltrops, because it's funny, one of the very first games I ran when I got back into playing, and I was running as a DM. So he said, I want caltrops. And what my response was? What's a caltrop?
Yeah.
Now, there is a reference to caltrops somewhere. It's not on the equipment list. There's somewhere.
Oh, there is a...
There is. There's a it's referenced somewhere.
We'll have to look that up.
Yeah, it's referenced somewhere. And so it depends. And strength bow. It depends.
Yeah.
So it depends on the situation. But I'm generally pretty easygoing. If it's on the equipment list in the player's handbook, it's not going to be hard to find.
But then there's chalk and other things that are kind of inferred. I mean, some of them are more benign, and you kind of allow that. But
I had a character, so I ran a one-off, and the guy was playing a gnome illusionist thief. I love gnome illusionist thieves. And this guy did a great job.
Did he just want it? Did he want a bag to asphyxiate himself?
No.
That would be. I would allow.
No, he did a great job with this gnome, and he wanted a bag of marbles. Oh, sure. Yeah, you find marbles.
Sure.
So marbles are going to be around, so that wasn't a problem. So it depends. Other people want very specialized things.
Right.
If you're spending, here's basically my rule. If I've heard of it, there's a good chance you'll get it. If you're describing to me what it is, probably not going to get it.
Right. So if I want the collapsible 10-foot pole that breaks into 10 pieces and it weighs only 20 gold pieces, and I can
really. You'll get it if it's one, or if you can say it in 1, maybe 2 words tops. You can. What do you want? Marbles.
Elephant.
Okay, well, there's a price. I mean, it is a city-state, so all right.
Right, and you're
price.
So
yeah, you can get an elephant. Oh, you can get an elephant.
In the town of 300, probably not. But that's one of the things. Oh, we all want war. They want war dogs or pigeons or these type of things. And again, it's like, how much time? Because remember, one of the things that will keep your game interesting is the sense of time. If you just kind of have this, time doesn't mean anything. Then you get questions like, well, we have a war elephant, or I want to learn this, I want to learn that. No, you don't have 6 months to train with a war elephant to figure that out. Can't I just get it?
There's some things you should consult with your fellow party members. So if you're we had one character, he brought his dog in, and I thought it was great.
Yeah, and a dog is one that you can definitely see, but just showing up at at PetSmart or Ye Merry PetSmart and picking up a war dog and expecting it to act like you've been training with it for 6 months is not fair.
Now, what I did is I thought this was fun was, so we had a character who wanted a dog, and so I did have him basically go down to like a PetSmart place, because I think, it may have been Pelinore, I can't remember state. And so I had like the dogs that were available, and each one had something good but a little flawed.
Nice.
You know, so in other words, it wasn't just your standard dog.
Right.
There was like, you know, I think one was Beholder, who, I don't know, he had like good eyesight, but he was like, I don't know, there's something bad about
Skittish, or
yeah, it was exactly, right? So he's very gassy, you know, part gas spore or something. I don't know, I can't remember, but yeah.
But so those are the type of things you have to think about as a dungeon master, and you know that's one of those. When in doubt, say, I don't think you have it here. That you'd have to go to the big city for that, and let the players kind of adjudicate some of that. That's what they're, you know, right now we use Meetup, and I basically said I don't want to spend a whole lot of time with this. You guys got to tell me what you're doing while you're in town. You have a week basically to do all this, because assuming some of you folks are going to train. And you know, I guess you were commenting on how many comments I had in the group.
I think I had like 85.
I think there's up to 90 now, so it's gotten crazy. Because they want, you know, so the next bleeds into what can they buy? Not only equipment, but they, you know, again, we talked about can they buy magic items? And again, that's a per DM thing. I do it where there's a trading thing, so I have some control over it, and I don't have them just opening the Dungeon Master's Guide and looking at, you know, page where it shows the gold pieces and go, my 3 potions are worth 2,000, so I want to now buy a +3 sword. Because what you'll find in the Dungeon Master's Guide is, so for instance, a +3 sword costs 7,000 gold pieces. A scroll, let's just say of, a potion of undead control is 2,500, and potion of healing is 400. So I take my 10 potions of healing, my 1 undead control, and I want a +3 sword. No, that's not going to work that way. And one of the things I do think, you know, if you have characters who have a skill that they want to use, you at least need to honor that. Meaning, if someone has a high charisma and they want to use it, you should give them an advantage in town when they're doing this. You know, I don't know about haggling, but you can say, you know, the paladin, because he's a highly charismatic character, they should get advantages when they deal with people, just like we would give advantages to strength and this and that. And sometimes we hand wave some of that.
No, and I agree with that, because I think most player characters put their lowest scoring charisma, unless they have to have it high for being what I think is a bard need or something.
There's a few.
Yeah, but and so that would reward people for having a little bit better. I agree with you completely on that. We don't use charisma enough as DMs.
So then, as they get higher up in level, you know, would you allow them to buy land, which is, you know, and you know, just buy parcels of land, you know, or buy a house or buy something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's got to be available. So I remember in the game I ran Tower of Xenopus, which was the sample module from the Holmes Basics set, and so there's going to be a little bit of spoiler here, I guess, but I mean, it only came out in what, like 1977 or whatever.
You never know.
You should know by now, right?
It's on my playlist, on my reading list.
Yeah, Tower of Xenopus, and it, you know, it ends at this. Well, I guess it ends at this. This tower, which is not the Tower of Xenopus, and I think you guys wanted a squad,
right? And
I told you that, well, no, I mean it's right outside the city-state. You've killed the baddie that lives there.
Yeah.
But that just means that it's going to be inherited by somebody, and I gave you guys a bit of a hard time about that, because I think a lot of times the assumption is, okay, we've killed this guy in this house, we'll live here now.
That's right, squatters' rights.
Squatters' rights, and part of me was, in retrospect, wished I had played that a way to get you that place, because I think that's the fun of the game, that hey, we live in this place, it connects the adventures, it gives it the flavor, but I was like, no, you'll have to pay for it if you want it. But so the answer to the question is yes. I mean, I think that's part of the fun of leveling up and becoming stronger is, you know, you have land
and or property. And I think yes, I think if you have a campaign, you definitely want to promote something like that. It removes the incentive to quote unquote, second air quote, murder hobo. If they're just these basically locusts that go from place to place, taking everything and moving on. If they have a place in the town, they're going to come back to that. It provides a base for operations, and it also supports this idea of retainers and henchmen, in that if you have a house, players who are not playing, they could stay at the house, and the rest of them could adventure. If you have, you can escape back there, and you could have your followers or retainers or henchmen live in this tower or castle. It wouldn't be a castle or something really significant, because obviously now you're getting to the feudal structure, if there is a structure of government. But a manor or something like that, that certainly would be reasonable. So, and then it gives you opportunities, the DM, to make your world alive. So one of them, retainers and henchmen. We talked a little about expert hirelings and getting them. So retainers and henchmen, specifically about henchmen, is you can go into town and you can advertise you're seeking basically someone to go with you on adventuring, and you would be their master in this case, open quote number 3, and you would take care of them and they would be loyal to you. And there's this whole process in the Dungeon Master's Guide about advertising and multimedia marketing campaigns, and you could almost see now it would be on either Tinder or Facebook, where they'd be social media and swiping for this. But that would be, that's a long process. It could take weeks to track someone. I haven't done a whole lot of it. I think if I was running a different campaign, I would at least encourage that. The problem is, again, then you have more characters you have to manage as you go into the dungeon. And the players really have to step up. If you're going to have 8 player characters and each of them have 1 or 2 retainers, you've got a party of 24 running through the dungeon. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this before on the podcast, that when I played back in the 80s, I don't remember bringing along a lot of people. It was just the party. But, Gygax was clear that I think he said smart parties do bring them along. Yeah. So I've always felt like if you wanted to get them, you could. I remember, your son did that, and that's how I learned about these rules about how, putting the advertisement out and how long and waiting. And so I agree with you. I mean, I would prefer it doesn't happen a lot, but since it's in the rules and smart players, I guess, do it, I would permit it. I wouldn't have a problem with it, and I'd go through the process in the DMG.
And, I think it's an opportunity to, again, flesh out your campaign. If you want to do that, I think when you have time constraints, or in our case, we like the old modules, we want to run them from the nostalgia perspective, it makes it a little more challenging. But if I was doing complete new campaign with my own setting, you would definitely want to do that, because both land and retainers and henchmen give you more hooks, more opportunities to flesh out the story, and it doesn't have to be this linear, you're going from here to there. So one of the things I've done is they in the campaign I'm running, they took over this underneath a broken tower. There was a lair. They took it over, and that's kind of their base when they go back to town. And a couple of times they've been ambushed, like the Peter Sellers, Inspector Clouseau, and Keto, you idiot! He attacks him to. Oh yeah. Okay, so the Pink Panther back in the movies, he would come home and his manservant would attack him to keep him on guard. And so again, the idea of here come. I think another YouTuber, famous advocate, Matt Colville, he's, and I think others. Adventurers are seen leery. These people come in, they cause problems, they spend a lot of money. It's like a biker gang that comes into town. Most people are not going to be happy with them. They look at them leery. And they're throwing money around like it's going out of style. Most people, peasants, live on 1 or 2 copper pieces a day, and here they are tossing tens of gold pieces. You're going to get some notice. You're going to get notice from thieves guilds, assassins maybe are going to come after you. You've killed, the high priest or whatever. Now the cult has got looking for you. So having that place in town, that sets up thieves trying to take your treasure if you put it in there, or assassins coming and killing. So that can be a fun thing, because then it gets that thing of the party's never safe. They always have to think about it, and if that's the game you want, then that's great. But then you are going to get more characters who go, they're going to spend 30 minutes before they go in their own house. All right, we're going to go around the back and check everything. And so if you want that, that's great. But it's definitely a style of play that I at least want to insert every once in a while, that the world is dangerous.
Well, I think that it should be dangerous if the party has done things during an adventure that warrants it. So, for example, your party strangled that nice old lady. Oh, I'm sorry. Right, you called her a witch? Is that
I
phrase
believe
you
she
used?
was an evil sorceress witch, based on
All
that.
right, tomato, tomato, whatever. Right, and so it was the mother of the owner. And yes, she did. I'm joking with you guys. She did rise and was very spelly.
Right.
And it wasn't good. And you guys
sucking our souls or something like
right.
that.
So you acted appropriately.
Yeah.
But it was the mother of the owner of the manor.
Right.
And so who's a pretty important dude.
Right.
And so he's going to come home and find her strangled and dead. That should have post-game repercussions out there. So
I agree, and I think because he's probably 15th level or above, even though we don't count levels, and our players are 2 or 3 level, I think when Dan is tired with the game, he's just going to say the wizard comes and delayed blast fireball hits you all, and you all roll 15 dice of damage and have a nice day.
And there it is.
So the last thing, or the 2 more things, is research. So this is another thing that players want to do once they get to a high enough level. They want to research spells. They want to create magic items. If there are evil characters and assassins, they want to get poison. These are all things you can do. There's a lot of information on there. It's not as complete as you would like, but it gives you the basics of it. And again, that's one of those, do you hand wave that or not? We know Dan has talked about his affinity for spell components. And here's another part you can take, which is how do you create magic items? So you can briefly describe some of the. Do you do that? Do you allow it to happen? And if you don't, why don't you allow that to happen?
Well, so my understanding, I don't have a lot of experience in this because the current campaign, the players are very low level, and I don't remember doing this back in the day. But you've got to be pretty high level, don't you, to start doing that, right? You have to be
the minimum to get scrolls and potions is 6th or 7th level.
Right, to be able to write them. So I've never gotten to that point. So I'm actually going to lean on you to talk about the creation of magic items.
So this is where the tension comes between what the players want and what the Dungeon Master's Guide says and the type of difficulty. They want to go, I want to create, the smart party would be like, during the downtime, basically the clerics and magic users and all the spellcasters spend all their time producing scrolls like a giant factory of things, and they just have 20 fireball scrolls because as we mentioned, spellcasting in combat is very dangerous. It can be lost, whereas a scroll, really, you discharge it. It doesn't say anything about if I'm reading a scroll and I get attacked, the spell is ruined. It doesn't mention that. It just basically, it's just like using a magic item. I can use the magic item, and an attack does not disrupt that.
Because there's no movement as part of it. There's no spell components. It's just
there's no semantics. You're just reading it. So now you could say it could be potentially ruined if a silent spell, but that would be different than an attack.
Sure. And the nice thing about scrolls is that they do not count against your allotment of spells for the day, right? So if you're a first level magic user, you have 1 spell per day, but if you have 5 scrolls, then you can cast all 5 of those.
Right. You have that extra bonus. So it's a win-win. Smart parties would definitely do it. So of course they want to crank these out. And the challenge is, if you read this as written, they have to create special ink. And the ink has to be, so an example of a petrification spell protection, you would need to have 1 ounce of giant squid sepia, 1 ballistic eye, 3 cockatrice feathers, 1 scruple of venom from a Medusa snake, 1 large peridot, 1 powdered, 1 medium topaz powdered, 2 drams of holy water, and 6 pumpkin seeds. This is an example of a recipe for the ink you have to do. So if you were to translate that, if you're in a town of 300 and they want to create a scroll of fireball, yes, you need the ground tooth of a red dragon and this and that. And where would they find this stuff? So how do you balance making it hand waving where they can just crank out 50 things like a video game, or you make it so painful that they have to take 18 quests to find all this stuff, and that's the challenge with it.
What I would do is, again, I like the home base as a big city, so it's not Dances with Wolves, right? You're not out in the middle, and so you'll have access to all of this, but it's going to cost you. And there is, in Dragon magazine, there was an article which talked about spell components and gave a price for them, and so that's what I would do.
So you can either do it that way, and I think that's definitely fair, or you can just say, there's this other theme of magic is so rare we're just whatever time period that you have, they're relearning how to do magic. That there was a better time when it was the ancients had more access to magic, and we're just a copy of what theirs. And so, no, you can't get scrolls because no one knows how to make them. We're just basically living off the ancient texts. We have the basics of how to do a spell, but we don't know the mechanics of how a spell was created. So we're just living off that, and that we're basically consuming off the old history. That's certainly acceptable play. Allowing them to do this, it could be fun. But I think you have to, if the characters want to do this, then they need to join in the fact of, yes, if you want to create a potion of healing, you need ogre magi blood of thread of saint's garment. That's what it says for a potion of healing.
You know what's interesting about that, and I know we talked about this before, is that if you're aware of, and I don't know, I said spell components, I don't know if these would be considered spell components. Spell components are things that cast spells, not necessarily make the scroll. But if you know stuff like this, say you kill an ogre magi, shouldn't you should put some blood in a flask.
So, and that's basically what, if you play, I think that's what kind of what the style was, that these, your magic users and priests and things become these ghouls that basically, as soon as something dies, they descend upon them with their little collection samples and start putting them in little petri dishes and putting them together.
Hey, they didn't create the world they live in.
That's right. They're just living through it.
They're trying to make their way.
Right. So, but and they also, I've had a couple of characters go, I want to research a spell in a week. It takes weeks to learn a spell, and they have to have a lab that's in a research facility that's sufficient enough to do that. So those are the things that you have to just kind of manage expectations.
And this is a bigger issue, which is how much time do you have? What's the flavor of your game? Again, if you've got tons of time,
right,
a lot of this stuff can be really, I think, pretty cool.
Right.
Because it really adds to the flavor. If you don't have a lot of time and you just want to do adventures, this kind of stuff, I think, really bogs it down. That's my opinion.
So, the mandatory is doing experience and level points. How you do that, how simple, that's up to you. The rest of this can either be done, what I'll call offline, when you're not getting together, or you can say, the first half an hour we'll just kind of do that, and you have a week or time in game, so that limits the amount of things if you want to move forward. The last thing, and just real quick, is the idea of castles. When you get to a named level, whether it's a lord, whether it's a patriarch, or some other level of class, it talks about the idea of you will attract followers and you can purchase land or acquire it. And then again, that's the ultimate non-adventuring thing you can do, because there's rules on how to build your castle. How much does an arrow slit cost? How much does a small gate cost? And you could hand this to the player and say, how big a castle do you want to build? And they can figure out, I want 4 towers and a moat and this and that. And they could actually spend the money on, and then you can attract followers. You could attract demi-human or humanoid soldiers. If you're evil wizard, you could have, you could be Saruman and all that, which is amazing, but that's a lot of time, and you're not in the dungeon. And I think the idea is once they get to that point, the characters are really transitioning from being player characters to becoming parts of your campaign. And again, that's a fun thing. And I think that's what I'd like to see my campaign get to, is that they do this great thing, and then the characters become part of the society, and then they they start with a new campaign.
Right, and you bring those characters back in as important NPCs, right? So, Lord Barrick or whatever is summoned you, and, and I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be curious. A lot of players don't want to do that. I think even though I think that's the tradition here, I think they want to keep playing because they keep wanting to get more and more powerful things, versus just saying, okay, now you're 9th or 10th level, you're a lord, you're going to go off and do.
It's like it's like the boxers; they can't retire.
Right, they can't let it go.
Well, Rocky Marciano, I think
he's never retired. I don't think he's done that.
But they keep fighting.
Exactly. So I think that's a good place to leave. We've talked a lot about things. So now we've gone over each of the parts that make up the game. And how much of each you want to do is something you have to think about. You don't have to start with all of them, but you're going to have or have a mastery of each of them, but you at least need to have each part of it to do that. Any other final thoughts with that?
Just real quick, so this is just sort of a note for the future. We should talk about, at one of our podcasts, how to start a first edition group, because we've gone through this.
Yes.
And we may have people listening to this and saying, yeah, I played back in the 80s, I want to play again, but how in the world do I find a group? Are there 1E players
Absolutely.
out there? So we're going to want to talk about that,
Yep.
because we've given them all the basics.
Yep.
We've got them all excited.
Exactly. Well,
They're ready to adventure.
We've had some comments on YouTube where people are like, "Oh, this has really got me fired up. I'm looking through my books again." So that's awesome.
Yep.
So that's it for that section, and now we're on to suggestion. And Dan, you go first. You're gonna cast your suggestion spell. What's the suggestion you're gonna do?
My suggestion is a campaign setting.
Okay.
Which is the Pelinore campaign setting. And you know that I tend to like more obscure things.
Yeah.
It's just part of my personality. And Pelinore, most people, when they think of a campaign setting for first edition, they obviously think of Greyhawk.
Yeah.
Gary Gygax's campaign setting, which of course was wonderful. Pelinore was in Imagine Magazine, which was the UK version of Dragon. It was TSR, as far as I recall correctly, magazine. And Pelinore was a campaign setting, and I used it recently. There was a TPK, and so I decided I wanted to move on. Not because I didn't like Pelinore, but we moved on to the City-State of the Invincible Overlord because I wanted to try that out. And I just found it to be a really nice campaign. It's very interesting, a lot of detail. There's a lot of information about the NPCs and how they're related, who knows whom. And there's been a Kelry has published online a remastering of it altogether, which is really nice. And so if you're looking for a campaign setting, something a little different, something that people don't know about, because everyone knows I'd be scared to use Greyhawk because they'd be like, well, those mountains aren't like that,
right.
Or you don't, this duchy is, no, that's not how that would act.
That's right.
If you're looking for something that could be kind of your own, that people haven't used before, is pretty manageable, I recommend to you Pelinore. It's Pelinore, the Pelinore campaign setting.
And when you ran it, it was very flavorful, and I actually listened to a podcast from the GROGTALK Files. They're a great podcast out of England, and because they're in England, they have the British perspective of role playing, and they had one of the editors, I don't know if he was the head editor from Imagine Magazine, talking about what one of their great accomplishments was Pelinore and how they kept putting things in and giving a lot of information about the campaign. And eventually, when they compiled it all, a very rich world of the motivations of the players, the NPCs, how things worked. And so I really enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy being murdered, but I did enjoy the campaign itself. Was a lot of fun. There seemed like you had a treasure trove of information that you didn't have to figure out, and it was cohesive, and it felt very immersive.
And one of the things was, so the deities were interesting because the clerics of the deities could use certain weapons based upon the deity, and so some of them could actually use edged weapons. Some of them were, you got to be a little careful. I think your son picked a deity for cleric who I think
that was amazing.
What was it? He didn't heal.
He was the love deity. He was the love guy. He couldn't heal. He couldn't fight.
He couldn't fight.
He couldn't heal.
He couldn't. Yeah, I can't remember what it was. It was not. He couldn't do much.
He's the god of love or whatever. Yeah.
And so that was not very. So you got to be. So in other
but
words,
I think he did it on purpose. It was almost because my
it.
son was kind of being he couldn't fight and he couldn't heal.
His eyes were wide open. I could probably find it in here. So while you're giving your suggestion.
Why you do that? Yeah. So, but I thought it was hilarious. I don't think the player characters found it too fun when he couldn't do anything for us.
No, not after a while. God of Romance, Melson.
Yeah.
And so
he couldn't. There's certain things he was prevented from doing. And so you basically, it's a cleric who can't attack and can't cast. He couldn't heal. He couldn't do anything.
Oh, changes the clerical abilities.
Yeah.
No cure spells.
Right.
That you do gain, detect, or dispel spells one level earlier. Non-combative.
Right.
So you're right. So they don't cure. They're not. If forced, fight at -5.
Right.
Lose all spells until forgiven. So. There's this idea, there's the adventuring cleric,
right,
and then there's the cleric who stays behind.
Yeah.
If you're worshiping this deity, are you really, should you be an adventuring cleric?
And I don't understand the non-healing. That doesn't, I'm sure there's reason behind, but combat, I can get the passives, and there's a lot of interesting flavor in the role playing. I don't know how well it will work in your traditional first edition game, but
because God of Romance, I mean, you would be permitted to touch as long as you have permission, right?
Right.
I mean, it's when you don't have permission is the problem.
Yeah, and some would argue that touching would be healing, so I'm not quite sure
so I can see no cure spells without permission of recipient.
Right. Yeah, it would have to be consensual healing.
But so other than being careful about picking that deity, if you're a cleric, the Pelinore Campaign setting is wonderful.
They should fail their save and really go look it up. And so what was the person who combined?
Well, this is Kelry, which is not a real name. It is somebody online who loves some of this old stuff. I think he's compiling. There's a town, Irillion, and he's compiling that now. And Kelry compiled Pelinore, so it's unauthorized, but he collected it all together. You can find on eBay the old Imagine magazine, so you could get these. I mean,
but this would be easier if you just wanted the campaign and you wanted to compile. You wouldn't have to do a lot of research.
Okay. Exactly.
So my suggestion is the Book of Layers. It's a later, almost mid '80s, probably in the early '83, '84. So the scenario, like with the random encounter, it's an AD&D TSR product. And I roll up on the Dungeon Master's random table a Minotaur. And Glades and Pixie see that Minotaur and they go, well, we're going to go after the Minotaur. He lives in a cave. What does it look like? How many Minotaurs? What kind of treasure it is? It's that thing where the grain, either you have to completely improv it or you kind of have to stop, I got to figure all this out, and the game crawls out. So the Book of Layers have a bunch of small little layers for... and they're level appropriate, starting with goblins all the way to Medusa and things like that. And so you can sit there and go, oh, I found a level 3 creature. I can look up in there and it has a small 5 or 6 room mini adventure of what that layer looks like. And you can just pull it out, insert it in your game, or you need a one shot, which is always the thing of, hey, I call Dan, I can't run today. Can you do something for 5th to 7th level? He doesn't have time. He needs just a quick 5 or 6 encounter thing, and he can use that. So there's a Book of Layers. There may have been a second Book of Layers, but I keep the Book of Layers on a PDF in that scenario of I've done a random encounter, and now I've caused myself, and I'm like, oh, this would be kind of interesting. They had a scenario where they were going through the mountains. I rolled up a Minotaur. I'm like, oh, that would be kind of cool. So I took the caves out of it, and I did it. And it took 5 minutes as opposed to 40 minutes. So that's the Book of Layers. And if you fail your suggestion, you can find that on eBay. So just wrapping up real quick, we are on we're on Twitter, we're on YouTube. Twitter is at GROGTALK. We have our website, GrogCon, because again we're getting ready. We're moving forward. I guess next month is now the meeting to talk about it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So GrogCon at Crucible. We're on Google Play and iTunes. We still want pictures. We're always looking for things to put up here. And any ideas for future items that we want us to talk about. If we want to go back and discuss more about XP and how you performance reviews and other ways you accomplish that, I'd love to hear that. Or guests. We're still working on having that guest series. So, for now, that's what we're going to do. We're going to move into Appendix A, but before we do that, we might as well sign off for here. I'm James.
I'm Dan.
And again, thanks for listening to GROGTALK.